the administration.
Okay, thank you.
So I've talked to you a little bit about this, and so I just want to have a little public conversation about the overnight that was added to the policy.
Correct.
Because that's my understanding when I read it the first time through, before that one word was added, that
Correct.
it's not going to be kept in our school at all. People will be bringing it in and leaving right away, but that's not exactly 100%.
Correct. I made a recommendation on page 2 to add the one word where it does say we will not, after item 6, school personnel shall not administer, hold overnight, or store overnight any cannabinoid products in any form. The reason for that is when we look down at the bottom of the first page, it does say the student's parent, guardian, or medical professional may administer the permissible form. Now, in District 49, we currently have 8 to 10 privately provided nurses, registered nurses, through contracting agencies because the parent's insurance is paying for that level of service. They go through our HR procedures, all of our volunteering information, but that's a private nurse. So that nurse, just from being in schools, let's say there was a skirmish in the hall, the nurse has it on them, they slip and fall, it comes out, we can't find it, another student picks it up. That way I made the recommendation not to store overnight. So the nurse would come in with the young man or young woman, go straight to the clinic, lock it up, go about their day. When it is time to administer it, they would come back, follow all of our other procedures, administer it, lock it up, go on about their day. At the end of the day, before the student gets on district transportation and or the parent comes and picks them up, the nurse or the parent must collect the cannabinoid product and leave campus with it. We would not have any responsibility for overnight storage.
And I know we're probably not this far down, but what would happen if that step is forgotten? Would our staff be responsible for disposing of it, or what happens if?
I can't say for 100% certainty that would not happen. I can say that I would meet with the school nurses and we would have an end of the day procedure that would ensure that the nurse makes sure that that privately provided nurse must come collect that prescription prior to leaving. And then that would be, we'd have 2 layers of defense on that, our registered nurses and our health techs that are in our clinics at all times.
Then a question for our business office would be our insurance. Have we looked to our insurance carrier that in case something with this policy, we would still be covered, since this is truly breaking federal law? Would our insurance company cover us if there was an incident related to this?
I don't know if you guys have my talks with Shannon, whether we were going to take this to them after this meeting.
I have not spoken. I have not spoken.
So that's basically next on the list.
I just interject that I don't know that it's clear that this is breaking federal law, and so I just want to object to that characterization.
All right.
But should we hear from our insurance company before we move it to a vote or anything? I don't think we want to.
I would like to hear that we're going to be covered from doing something like this.
I recommend we move it forward and ask for that answer prior to when we vote on it.
Because of the snow event that delayed this meeting by 1 week, we are recommending that if you choose to move it forward, that you move it forward for consideration at the May regular meeting, which gives us almost 6 full weeks, not only to gather information on the technical side like insurance, but we would also like to have a community conversation and generate some input. So our communications department has already anticipated that possibility, and they've developed a relatively short, I'll call it a survey, but it's a little bit more than that. It's got a little bit of education and a little bit of checking for understanding with our community, and we give our community a chance to inform you as the board, so that you would have 2 other opportunities between now and when you would actually vote on it. You have 2 other opportunities to discuss it if you wanted to, or just to create a public space for people to come and comment on the topic.
One other thing that I noticed on there is it doesn't have a cost associated with this, and I know we can't probably come up with a good estimate, but I would like at somewhere in our budget to, or somehow be keeping track if this increases our special ed budget over time, because if we are, I mean, I hope other districts will look at this, but at this point, talking to other board members around surrounding us, they are not at all interested in going with this type of policy. So we are the only district even in Colorado Springs. I worry that we will have people move to our district because we have this policy that is needed for their child. But I also want to make sure that we're aware of what that cost could be as we move forward, and then hope that other districts will follow if we do. So that would be my one concern, caution.
Yes, ma'am. And if we move forward this, we could easily track that for you, because of, we'd have obviously new students coming into the district through enrollment. And then as well with our nurses and then keeping track and records. And then Mr. Ridgway and I, for a week, can break down all related services for you if you request that.
This is kind of a different technical question. I know we already have lock boxes in the nurse's office that are used because we have kids who take Schedule IIs
Correct.
prescribed at school all the time for other medical conditions. Are we going to have a separate box that is specific to this so that so the people handling it are completely the private nurses? Or is that going to be intermingled with the other medications that are locked?
I met with our nurses on March 18th and did not provide them a copy of this, but read the policy to them because the work session that had been canceled had not happened yet. Their recommendation, well, they didn't make a recommendation on that front. They did say their main concern was we may need more lockable cabinets. So I will get with Ms. Gabrielson on Monday when she returns from spring break and find out if that would be something she would recommend as a separate lockable cabinet, or can this be stored with our other Schedule II items?
So this is totally in compliance with the latest state statute policy.
Yes, sir. Don't need
And
to
does the
know if this
state-
complies.
And not having read the state policy, it wasn't provided, but do they offer protection to school districts if the feds interfere?
There's currently a bill going through right now, but it is not passed, that says and states if the federal, and there's an issue with flow through. So the federal dollars go to the state and then the state flows them through to us. And that's in the form of 6B, which is special education, Title II, Title I, Title III, which is English language development. There is a bill going through right now that does state, it has not been passed, that if the federal government stops that, the state will reimburse the local district in whole. But again, that has not been passed. And that was forwarded to me by parents.
Well, and there are two pieces that kind of also are trying to mitigate that. One is in the policy, it explicitly states, if the feds contact us and cite us and say cease and desist, we immediately cease and desist. And that, I believe, from what I read, was also in collaboration with the Department of Justice and consultation with them, because oddly enough, DOJ has one opinion, and of course, others in the feds have the other, because God forbid the federal government, two branches ever agree on anything. But my understanding is this is also already occurring fairly widespread in the state of Maine. And the federal government has not taken action against the state of Maine or a school in New Jersey, which eventually gets flow-through funds as well that are federal dollars, correct?
Yeah, Dr. Luke Butcher for the record. Yeah, Maine has stepped out in front of this. As Zach alluded to, our state is working along the lines to be able to identify the districts. Before we heard about that information, since it has not passed, we put the portion within our policy to say that if they say cease and desist, we'll stop immediately. The most likely scenario is not them simply saying, you did this, your money is gone. It's more likely to say, we appreciate what you're doing for your people there, but we need you to stop, and at that point we would stop. And I guess the distinction, as Kevin said at the beginning, is that we're talking about the path to be able to have pharmaceutical grade cannabinoid products. They already have those in Europe. So they're doing this in an effort to distinguish it from the recreational smoker or medical marijuana. That's why specifically, when I looked at the CASB model policy, it was called medical marijuana. I wanted to be more specific than that policy, so we made it cannabinoid products, because we're talking about those things that approach pharmaceutical grade products, which as things are going and it makes more sense, it kind of gives the federal government the ability to look at some products that are not that THC based high kind of thing, to give something that helps kids who are having problems with seizures, with epilepsy, and also one of the reports I looked at was actually from CNBC with Kramer, if you know who Kramer is. He talked about this being the thing that would replace oxycodone, because oxycodone is more dangerous than this product, and that would be a thing for people for pain. So there's a movement, there's a business world opinion on it, so it's something that's probably going to be inevitable, and it goes to the whole thing, look from the medical perspective, do no harm. We'd be looking to do no harm and give the parents the ability to administer on school property versus carting a kid who probably doesn't need that kind of travel across the street or out to the car or something like that, or otherwise sneaking something in.
Well, and that was going to be my other comment. I think there's a couple of pieces of this. One is to recognize we already have major institutions in the state of Colorado that allow parents to do this. Children's Hospital Colorado routinely allows parents to bring cannabinoid products and administer them themselves. The parent administers to the child in the hospital room, but they're allowing full transparency and administration of this medication to kids in that situation. Memorial, when Children's and Memorial separated ways, Memorial's board did the same thing for children receiving surgery and care at Memorial Hospital. They did that this fall as well. So we have major medical institutions that are top flight. You know, Children's Hospital Colorado is a top flight children's hospital. They're not going to allow something that they think is bad for kids. They're going to be doing something, recognizing that if we can help even a little, it's important. And the other piece is the reality that we know things end up on our campus whether we're aware of them or not. And if we provide an appropriate venue for a child to receive something, we are protecting everyone better than if we say don't carry this at all. Because there are plenty of situations, and we can all think back to when we were teenagers ourselves, of did you carry your own medication in your purse, whether or not it was allowed in a school policy, and was that the safest thing for the student body? And if the school had a process by which you could still have access to that needed medication, that was probably safer for everyone in the building than having something that no adult is aware is even in the building because we haven't given them a venue to do it. So I applaud you for continuing to follow this and staying on top of what's happening at the state and federal level so that we can help all of our students and provide them what they need. And so I want to thank you for all of the work that you guys have put into this.
And so, let's clarify, what is the benefit of the school doing this?
Well,
As opposed to what it was before, because the kids before needed the medication too, they got it without this program. So what is the difference?
One of the benefits, and I think Marie put a fine point on it very eloquently, when we look at our cultural compass, talking about transparency, things will happen anyway, whether, depending what the insurance company says. If you don't think this goes on right now, it probably still does. Then we have the ability to have accountability of that cannabinoid product as it comes into the school. We have a chain of custody. We have a procedure for where it's supposed to be and where it's not supposed to be and how it's supposed to leave the school. If a kid is having an episode and a mom, as history shows us, we have a precedent for this, take something in there that's unsanctioned. If that gets out into the school population, we still have the same liability, but now this liability is something that we didn't have any mechanism in place to track it. So this right here gives us a safer mechanism for us to have that in our schools versus having it come in undercover at night or having it being snuck in a kid's oatmeal or something like that. So it puts us in a place where we have a knowable situation which we can control and be safe in versus an unknowable situation. So we have foreseeable outcomes versus unforeseeable outcomes. And I think that's probably the biggest reason why we probably should go in this direction.
Okay, and so do we have consensus? Yep.
Comments. How do we know that the products being administered are safe for that child? And for the lawyers in the room, when these parents sign these letters, are they really solely responsible? Can we be somehow legally still held responsible even though they have a hold harmless agreement?
So to try and answer that, sir, on the second paragraph, it says, this policy does not apply to administration of any other prescription or non-prescription medications. Administration of all their prescription and non-prescription medications to students on district property during school hours should be in accordance with existing board policies. So we have an existing board policy that states that prescriptions must have a script from a doctor, a medical doctor. So this cannabinoid product would still have to have a medical prescription from a doctor that our school nurse would verify.
And currently, my understanding of the medical marijuana cards is that's a recommendation, not actually a prescription, because doctors cannot prescribe THC, et cetera, because it's a federally controlled substance, so they recommend it. How does that fit with this?
Well, it would have to be recommended, prescribed from the medical doctor. So
Okay.
they could not come in with just a parent note.
Okay.
For that.
And I'm gonna inject as well. There's a significant medical difference between the chemical compound THC, which is psychoactive, and which is prescribed for its psychoactive properties, appetite increase, stress reduction, et cetera, and what this policy contemplates, which is cannabidiol, but it's CBD, so it's THC versus CBD. CBD would never be prescribed to reduce stress because it doesn't have that property. It wouldn't be prescribed to increase appetite because it doesn't have that property. It would be prescribed to reduce a seizure disorder, and by far the most common application. And so rather than putting ourselves in the place of making those judgments, we defer to the medical community, which in Colorado is probably the most expert medical community for pediatric administration of cannabidiol products. And so that's why I really appreciate the way this policy was crafted. Although it referenced the CASB policy, we really did tighten it up and focus it explicitly on the CBD compound in cannabinoid products.
Right, which means this policy would not allow someone who is prescribed a THC product for stress relief
Correct.
to have it administered on our campus.
That would
This is
still be
only
a
allowed-
violation.
Right, that would still be a violation of our policy. Right.
Just
so-
clarifying.
Yeah.
That's a great point. Second question, the whole harmless, are we really held harmless when a parent signs a document like that in court? Because lawyer speak kind of gets confusing.
Mr. Miller?
I'm not fully prepared to respond, but I will say that under Colorado law, yes, the answer is yes. Because we've got this stop provision, I'm fairly confident that we protect ourselves federally. And it's yet to be seen how this session unfolds, and we'll be in much more comfortable territory with regard to this question by the end of May.
How would this, given that our staff is not the person administering, correct? We're allowing someone to come onto our campus and administer, but this is not a district person administering. It's someone either paid by the family member's private insurance or a family member themselves administering. How is that different in terms of things like hold harmless than when my daughter forgets to take her morning medication and I drive up to the school with the prescription bottle and say, can you call my daughter to the nurse's office, and I give her her medication myself? I mean, I've always assumed, seeing as I'm accessing my child and it's my kid's med and the school obviously would not let me give it to her without the name being on the bottle and stuff, but the school nurse isn't administering it under a doctor's order, I'm administering it to my child. Is there
I'm answering cautiously as a lawyer, but I will tell you that there is a consensus, and it continues to emerge. So, for example, CASB's legal team has reviewed and supports this as defensible. To get right to the gist of your questions, Mr. Graham, it would be a case by case, determination. But broadly speaking, this is very defensible.
Do we know how the new chairman of the CDE feels about this? Has he weighed in either way?
He has not weighed in. so I won't speak for him. However, 4 of the 5 remaining candidates for president have at least indicated that they don't intend to ride in and over the current federal practice related to states that are allowing both medical marijuana and CBD products is very gentle. It has not been punitive or an assertion of federal authority, and 4 of the 5 candidates have indicated that they would maintain that status, and the one has not made an indication. So nobody has said we're gonna come in and shut down Colorado and Oregon and Washington State, and lots of other states now that have medical marijuana. So it doesn't look like that's the trajectory at the federal level either.
When would this go into effect, the beginning of next school year? If we're not really gonna vote on it till May, can we say next school year?
That would be a reasonable part of the motion, that the board could make that policy effective. It makes sense to us administratively that the school year ends 2 weeks after your last meeting. So if you gave us until August to develop procedures and install locking cabinets, et cetera, we would have a smoother training transition into this new policy environment.
The reality is the medications that many children who have seizure disorders that don't require cannabinoids to treat, their rescue medications have far more street value than this will. And we have those in our buildings, and we have people having to carry them for those children, as well as even medications for ADHD. I think the level of security that was around it when my child was taking one of the ADHD meds was unbelievable, from like how I had handled the mail and everything else, because the street value of that, because it is psychoactive, is far higher than what this would be. So it's because it is originally sourced from marijuana more than what it actually does to your body that is creating more of the angst. Given what we know we have in our buildings for kids to try and keep them safe and keep them productive now. All right, so.
I would just like to say personal opinion on the actual page that says agenda item. I'm not necessarily sure, maybe I misunderstand, but I'm not quite sure how this group of students is disenfranchised. So, you know, I don't think we should identify or create groups of disenfranchised students when not getting a certain medicine that hasn't been approved yet is not necessarily disenfranchised.
Oh,
Just
the language I use, just by the literal definition of disenfranchised, they are doing things that are outside of the franchise, but they don't have the power to do so within the franchise. And that's what I meant by that, not anything more provocative.
I worry then eventually they say it's my legal right. It's now a right instead of what it should be.
Okay, so we want to move that forward for the May meeting. We'll be able to determine what our action is on it at that point. Is everyone good there?
Yep.
Okay, so Donna, can you put that on the May regular meeting agenda, please?
When will we hear back from the community survey informational piece that's being done? At that
Mr.
May
Meister.
meeting?
When would you like it?
I would like it ahead of the May meeting. So can we get the feedback within the packet timeline? Would that be a fair piece for all of us? To get that feedback as a part of the packet so that
Yep.
we're seeing it as we're reading our packet and deliberating about how we'll vote?
Yes, we'll specify an end date to that conversation that'll take place online and digitally so that we can include it in the packet.
Okay, thank you, Matt.
Yeah, I would think by the April working meeting, right? Because you don't want to vote on it until you hear what the public has to say.
We're moving it to the May meeting, but the point would be you'll get the
We
public.
should hear more of what the public says before even that meeting, is what I'm saying.
So you want them to try and do the survey in like a week and a half to give us the data?
No, the next meeting is the actual session, right? And then later on in April is another working session.
Right.
So we should get information from the community by the next working session. Yes. That gives us enough time to think or do what we need to do.
Mr. Graham,
Actually
Yeah.
That's a
That's
fairly
a-
tight timeline, because to get that information to you by your packet deadline a week in advance, we would be limiting our community who's still on spring break. The idea of pushing it back to May is that it gives us about a 3-week window to open up, gather information, and then package that to you in your packet. People could still come and speak at either your next regular meeting or at the May regular meeting. So they'd have 2 opportunities to weigh in person, and then a 3-week window or so to weigh in on the survey. But you would still have the same level of input from the community.
Well, and I would also say, in the way that we're planning to facilitate this online, you would be able to watch the conversation in real time as well. So there would be kind of a landing page on d49.org that will bring all of our social media sites to that page. So, for example, requiring someone to be on Facebook to partake in the conversation that would develop would not be required. They could just go to d49.org and see that and comment to anything that they saw on Twitter or on Google Plus or on Facebook on that page as well. So you would be able to watch that happen in real time, in addition to any formal survey type device that we would then include in the packet.
Could we also then, to in part address John's concern, make sure we're pushing out information about the fact that the board will be making a decision at the May meeting on this prior to our April meeting, and letting them know you have an opportunity to speak at board meetings in April and in
Absolutely.
May. Because if we get that information out early, then they can use the open forum, which is a part of what it's designed to be. That way we're being fully transparent. At a work session, they don't have that opportunity to speak to us. So they get to watch what we say to one another, but they don't get to have that same interaction. So if we're pushing out that, they can come and comment to us personally in open forum at the April and May meetings. They can participate in the conversation online. Feel free to email any of us. If we get that message out early and often, I think that would address some of John's concern.
And we'll do some additional work about if this is going to be on the April work session as well, about talking about live streaming, and they can comment in that live stream or any of these other places where we facilitated the conversation. So we'll definitely do a lot of work in getting that out there.
Thank you.
Thank you too, Zach and Dr. Fletcher. You know, you guys are ahead of the curve as far as this is concerned. Your desire, compassion for these children that need this medication so they can live a fuller life experience and learning and school and things like that. So thank you guys very much. Really appreciate it.
Hey, Zach, well, the next person's coming up. Just curious, this is pretty much driven by the Dravet syndrome students we have. How many do we have in the district at this moment? Exactly.
Students that have been officially diagnosed with Dravet, or that are accessing.
They're accessing in Dravet, so.
Anecdotally, I know of around 40 students that are currently using CBD with Dravet, less than 17.
Okay.
So some have significant seizure disorder that does not rise to a medical diagnosis of Dravet.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, so then our next item is the IT report from Mr. Lichtenberg.
Hello, so I'm John Lichtenberg. I'm your instructional technology specialist. Also wanted to, you've heard at least once a year from IT, which is like the nuts and bolts of the district, and servers and closets and hard drives and all that stuff. This is all about instructional technology. So I don't think the board has ever actually heard from a position that is dedicated to just instructional technology. So I'm really happy to be up here to just giving you information tonight, especially after all that. So I just want to give you 3 pieces of good news that you just have to sit back and listen to. So I'm excited about this.